When we give something out of love, we never expect it to be used against us. But sometimes, the greatest betrayal does not come from enemies or strangers. It comes from those we call family, those who once called us by name with warmth, only to later erase us from the very life we built for them. I was not prepared for what came next. I did not see it coming. But I remember the moment everything started to change. Before we begin, please like this story and leave a comment telling me from which city you are listening. For those who click subscribe, I pray that God blesses you with health, heals you from all illnesses, and grants you abundant fortune. Share this channel with someone who loves powerful stories. And remember, do not worry about watching the visuals. Just close your eyes and listen. Let your imagination do the rest. The images are just decoration. The real story lives in your mind. I never imagined that the creak of an old floorboard could feel so comforting. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and this house, with its ivy-covered porch and chipped blue shutters, was my pride. I taught children for 35 years. Saved every penny. Raised my son Daniel here. Built a life here. This home was more than wood and brick. It was memory. It was love. And when I retired, I thought the right thing to do was to share it. Daniel had just married Vanessa. She was warm at first, all smiles and homemade cookies. She would call me Mom with such sweetness it nearly made me tear up. So when they mentioned they were struggling financially and renting was too much, I offered the house. Not to give away entirely, of course. I signed a revocable life estate agreement. That meant the house would be theirs to live in and eventually inherit, but I would have the right to stay in it until the end of my days. It seemed simple, fair, loving. Vanessa hugged me tight the day we signed the documents. "You have no idea what this means to us," she said. Daniel kissed my forehead. "Thank you, Mom. You're saving us." At first, it felt like a blessing. The three of us cooked meals together. Vanessa painted the guest room. Daniel fixed the gutters. I finally had someone to share Sunday mornings with again. But as the days passed, small things started to shift. The couch in the living room disappeared one weekend while I was out at the store. In its place was a sleek gray sectional. All my photo frames from the hallway vanished. When I asked Vanessa, she smiled and said, "I thought we could refresh the place a bit. I kept your photos in the attic so they'd be safe." I said nothing. Maybe she meant well. Maybe it was just excitement. But the next week, my mother's antique lamp was gone. Replaced by a tall modern floor lamp from a store I had never heard of. I found the antique wrapped in newspaper in the garage. The house still stood. But piece by piece, the feeling of home started slipping through my fingers. I told myself to be patient. That they were just settling in. That maybe in time we would all blend into this space together. I was wrong. Something else was beginning. And I could feel it, like a storm hiding behind a blue sky. It started with the scent of something unfamiliar. One morning I came downstairs to the sharp smell of lemon pine and plastic. Vanessa had replaced the rug in the foyer, the one my husband and I bought on our honeymoon in Charleston, with a white faux fur runner that didn't belong in this house. The old rug, she said, was too worn and smelled like dust. She had already taken it to the dump. I stood there in silence. My mouth was dry. My fingers twitched to say something, but Daniel walked in with a cup of coffee and kissed Vanessa on the cheek like it was any ordinary day. "You okay, Mom?" he asked. I nodded. Just nodded. Next came the bookshelf. My favorite corner. It was filled with first editions and worn paperbacks, memories of summer nights under a reading lamp. I came home one afternoon to find the entire shelf gone. The wall was now decorated with floating cubes, holding color-coordinated hardcovers with empty titles, all for display. "Pie books?" I asked. Vanessa smiled. "They're in boxes in the basement. These shelves just fit the room's energy better." I went downstairs and sat with those boxes. Ran my fingers across the spines. Some still smelled like the classrooms I taught in. Others had scribbles in the margins from students I had tutored for free. I sat there for hours in silence, surrounded by words that used to make me feel alive. One night I overheard them talking. "She's never in the living room anymore," Vanessa said. "She probably wants her space," Daniel replied. "No, she doesn't belong in there." "Not really." Those words crawled into my chest and stayed there. A few days later, I noticed the thermostat was no longer responding to my usual setting. I used to keep it at 72. It was now locked. I asked Daniel about it and he looked confused. Vanessa stepped in. "Oh, I changed the password." The system kept glitching, so I set it up with my email. I'll fix it later. He never did. Instead, I started wearing sweaters indoors. Sometimes even gloves in the kitchen. I didn't want to ask again. Soon she began calling the rooms by new names. My sewing room was now the wellness nook. The dining room became the flex space. My old study was turned into Vanessa's meditation room. You don't use these anyway, she told me once as she lit incense in the middle of my former study. It's better this way. Daniel barely noticed. Or maybe he didn't want to see it. Every morning felt like walking through someone else's house. Yet my name was still on the deed. My rights still existed, legally. But emotionally I was vanishing. One afternoon I tried to find a box of holiday ornaments I had stored in the attic. I needed to hold something that felt like it belonged to me. The attic was locked. When I asked for the key, Vanessa replied with a short laugh. Oh, I don't even know where it is. Daniel might have it somewhere. He knew. I saw it in her eyes. The holidays came and went. I stayed in my room most of the time. No one asked me to decorate. No one asked for the family recipes. I was offered a seat at the table but not a place in their world. Something was happening. And it was no longer small. I used to know every sound in this house. The pipes that knocked in the winter. The floorboard that creaked outside the guest bathroom. But now I was hearing new sounds. The soft beep of locks changing, the whisper of closed doors when I entered a room, the click of lights being turned off behind me. Vanessa had started hosting events. She called them wellness gatherings. Groups of women with yoga mats and smoothies filled my kitchen on Saturday mornings. They walked past me as if I were the help, or worse, invisible. No one asked my name. No one cared to know. I asked Daniel once, "Why didn't you tell me about the party?" He looked surprised. "It wasn't really a party, Mom. Just something Vanessa does with her friends." "But this is still my house," I said. He looked uncomfortable. "You said it was our home now." Our home. But my voice no longer lived in its walls. One morning, I noticed my mail had stopped arriving. Bills, letters, even my church bulletin. All missing. When I checked with the post office, they told me a change of address had been filed online. The new mailing address was the same house, but with Vanessa's name as the primary resident. My name was gone. I printed the email confirmation the clerk gave me and tucked it inside a folder I kept in my nightstand. I didn't know why I kept it. Maybe proof that I wasn't imagining things. Maybe because something inside me had started to wake up. Something old and sharp. The next week I found my jewelry box open. I never left it open. My late husband's gold cufflinks were gone. So was the emerald pendant my mother gave me on my wedding day. I searched for hours, every drawer, every box. When I asked Vanessa, her tone was cool. "Oh, maybe you misplaced them. You've been a bit forgetful lately." She smiled. Forgetful. That word lingered in the air like smoke. I knew what she was doing. She wanted me to doubt myself. To question my memory. To feel weak. But I remembered everything. I remembered the sound of her heels the night she passed by my door. I remembered the way she looked at the necklace at Thanksgiving last year. I remembered exactly where I had left it. That night I sat on my bed and stared at the ceiling. The walls felt closer. The air colder. I whispered to myself, "You are not crazy." Then I said it again. Louder. "You are not crazy." The next morning I opened a locked drawer in my dresser and pulled out an old notebook. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed, but it would do. I began to write things down. Date. Time. What disappeared. What changed. What was said. I documented how the thermostat changed every other day. I noted how Vanessa ordered new security cameras, none of which pointed toward her own car, but one directly faced my bedroom window. I noticed how she began using coded language with Daniel. Small things. "She had another moment," she would say. "She's drifting again." I wasn't drifting. I was drowning and they were watching. One night I overheard her talking on the phone. "She has no idea what's coming. I just need a few more weeks." I stood outside the door, heart pounding in my ears. What was coming? I stepped away before she noticed me. My hands were shaking but my spine was straight. I did not sleep that night. The next day I bought a set of 3 miniature cameras online. I paid in cash and had them delivered to my old neighbor's house. I told no one. It was time to stop reacting. It was time to start watching. The necklace was never really valuable to anyone but me. A teardrop emerald set in gold, worn and scratched. but it had belonged to my mother. She wore it to church every Sunday until the day she died. I kept it wrapped in velvet, hidden beneath my sweaters in the back of my closet. I checked it once a month just to feel close to her. Until one evening it was gone. I tore through the drawer, then the closet, then the room. I even emptied the laundry basket. Nothing. The velvet pouch lay flat, limp, and cold in my palm. I felt my pulse thudding in my throat. That night I waited until the house was asleep. I crept down the hallway, stepping between the creaking boards I knew by heart. I stood outside Daniel and Vanessa's room. Her handbag was on the side table, slightly open. I didn't take anything. I only looked. Inside was a folded envelope from a local pawn shop. I couldn't read all of it, just the edges. My name. The word necklace. A dollar amount. I pulled back. Quiet. Careful. I returned to my room and sat on the bed. The rage that came over me was not loud. It was silent. Dense. Like a black fog spreading under the skin. I clutched my knees and rocked slightly, the way I used to comfort children in my classroom when the world felt too big for them. He had taken it. And she had signed for it. The next morning I said nothing. I buttered my toast. I folded laundry. I listened as Vanessa told Daniel she was heading out to run errands. She kissed him, smiled at me, and left without a second glance. I waited until she was gone. Then I went into their room. I found the envelope in the drawer. I took it. I scanned it with my phone and printed a copy. The signature was shaky, imitating mine. But it wasn't mine. I knew every loop and curve of my name. I kept the copy in my nightstand, beneath the email about the address change. It was not the first betrayal. But it was the first that felt criminal. That night I called my old friend Marjorie, a retired librarian and a woman who had once testified in court against a local scammer. She still had a police contact, and she told me what I needed to start collecting. Timestamps, receipts, proof of possession. I thanked her and I lied. I said I was helping a friend. But it was for me. That same week, Vanessa began telling Daniel that I had forgotten the stove on. That I was confusing names. That maybe I needed a professional evaluation. She just needs help, she said gently, like she was saving me. Daniel didn't fight it. He nodded, said he would look into it. He didn't ask if it was true. That's when I realized. She wasn't just removing things from the house. She was preparing the story. Laying the groundwork. If she could make me seem unstable, then no one would believe what I said. Not even my own son. I stood in front of the mirror that night and looked into my own eyes. The same eyes that watched students grow. That stayed open through sleepless nights of motherhood. That read bedtime stories and funeral programs and letters from my late husband. They were still sharp. Still mine. And I whispered to my reflection, she picked the wrong woman. Then I began to plan. Quietly. Thoroughly. The way a teacher prepares a lesson she knows will change everything. The cameras arrived wrapped in discreet brown packaging. No brand names, no labels, just a quiet box that held my only chance at reclaiming truth. I opened it in my locked bedroom, read the instructions carefully, and tested each one before I hid them in the house. The first went behind the ceramic vase in the living room. The second inside the clock on the mantel. The third, the most important, I placed high on the bookshelf in the hallway facing the entrance to my room. They were motion activated. Sound sensitive. Linked to a drive only I could access. That week I played along. I let my voice trail off mid-sentence as if I had forgotten what I was saying. I asked Daniel what day it was even though I knew. I told Vanessa I couldn't find my medicine. The same medicine I had already hidden, documented, and sealed with the pharmacy receipt. She nodded every time gently, like I was a fragile glass about to crack. Maybe it's time we talk to someone, she told Daniel. Just in case. Just in case. While she laid the foundation for my erasure, I was building my archive. Every slip of the tongue she made, every comment about my state of mind, I wrote them down. Dated. Timed. Cross-referenced with camera footage. It became my job. My routine. Like lesson planning all over again. I noticed how she adjusted the thermostat 5 minutes after I left the room. Lower every time. I captured the moment she whispered into the phone, laughing, "She thinks the lamp moved on its own." I found an email she had left open on the family computer, addressed to a real estate agent. She was inquiring about market value, stating that the property was cleared for sale pending title correction. Title correction. I printed it. She had crossed a line. Not just moral but legal. And yet I said nothing. I smiled at breakfast. I offered to do dishes. I asked her about her wellness blog and she told me all about her growing followers, how she wanted to convert the den into a home studio. Meanwhile, I kept a folder beneath my bed. Inside were copies of my original deed, the revocable life estate agreement, video timestamps, the pharmacy receipt with the changed prescription pickup, photos of missing items with matching pawn documents, the email she wrote pretending to be me, each piece layered like sediment, like history. One morning I watched from the hallway as she opened my mail, glanced through it and tossed it in the trash. My name in ink, discarded like waste. That night I retrieved it, ripped but still readable. He was too confident now, too sure I would not fight back. He believed I was weakening, that I was folding into the background. But I was sharpening. The night before Thanksgiving I pretended to fall asleep early. I heard her on the phone again whispering, "Tomorrow I'll humiliate her. One last time." I didn't know what she meant, but it didn't matter, because I already knew what I was going to do. I sat at my desk and printed a letter, one I had drafted weeks before and waited patiently to send. A formal eviction notice. Prepared. Legal. Signed. My hands trembled as I folded it into an envelope. Not from fear. From the weight of justice finally rising. Thanksgiving morning arrived like any other. Quiet, cold, and heavy with expectation. The house smelled of cinnamon and rosemary. Vanessa had taken over the kitchen, instructing Daniel on where to place the cutlery, how to angle the wine glasses, what music to play in the background. "Keep it mellow," she said. "Something soft. She gets overwhelmed." That was how she referred to me now. I stayed in my room most of the morning, listening to the footsteps, the doorbell chimes, the sound of heels against hardwood as guests arrived. Friends from Vanessa's wellness circle, a couple of Daniel's old co-workers and even Marjorie, invited without my knowledge, though I suspected Vanessa hoped for witnesses. When I finally stepped into the living room, all eyes turned toward me. "There she is," Vanessa announced, holding a wine glass, smile wide and tight. "Eleanor, our family matriarch." Her voice dripped with charm, but her eyes were steel. I nodded, offered a soft smile, and took my seat at the table. The room glowed with string lights and flickering candles. It looked perfect. But beneath the tablecloth, my hand rested on the envelope inside my coat pocket. As dinner began, Vanessa raised her glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said. "To Eleanor. For being here with us tonight. Despite the challenges she's been facing lately." She paused for effect. The room fell into a hush. "Memory is a fragile thing," she continued. "And we all need grace as we age. So thank you, Eleanor, for letting us support you." Gasps were swallowed in silence. No one spoke. I placed my fork down. Gently. Calmly. Then I stood. "I appreciate your concern, Vanessa," I said. "Truly. But I think it's time everyone knows what's really happening." Her smile faltered. Just slightly. I reached into my coat and removed the envelope. Walked to Vanessa's side of the table. Placed it in front of her plate. "This," I said, "is a formal eviction notice. You have 30 days to vacate this property." Silence. Utter, profound silence. Vanessa blinked. "Excuse me. I've revoked the life estate, as is my legal right. I have documented every violation, every deception, every act of coercion you've committed under this roof." I turned to Daniel. "And you let it happen." He stared at me like he didn't recognize my face. "I don't understand," he muttered. "You will," I said. I looked toward Marjorie. She gave the smallest nod, one that told me she understood, that she had seen enough. Vanessa stood quickly, knocking over her glass. "You can't do this. You're not well. You're confused. You don't even remember." "I remember everything," I cut in. My voice was low, firm. "I remember you changing the locks. I remember you calling me unstable. I remember the necklace, the mail, the email you sent in my name. I have it all on record." The camera behind the vase blinked once, confirming it was on. Witnessing everything. Vanessa's face drained of color. "This is insane." "No," I said, stepping back. "This is clarity." No one moved. The table, once buzzing with conversation and laughter, now felt like a courtroom. A place where truth had finally taken its seat. I walked back to my chair, sat down, and calmly resumed my meal. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said softly. No one answered. But I had never felt more heard. It took less than 48 hours for Daniel to call me. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking, "we need to talk." I had been expecting it. Not the tone, not the pain I heard behind his words, but the call itself. I told him he could come by the next morning. Alone. When he arrived, his shoulders were slumped. He sat on the edge of the living room sofa, one of the few pieces Vanessa hadn't replaced, and rubbed his hands together like he was preparing for surgery. "She's hiring a lawyer," he said. I nodded. "She says you're unstable. That she has messages, audio clips, conversations where you admit to forgetting things." I leaned forward, calm. "I was pretending." He looked up, startled. "I knew she was trying to discredit me," I said. "So I gave her what she wanted. On the surface." I stood and walked to the hallway, returning with a thick folder. I placed it on the coffee table in front of him. Everything's in there. Every email. Every receipt. Video logs. Witness names. Property records. The original agreement. The forged signature. Daniel didn't open it. He stared at the cover like it might burn him. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I didn't want to believe." "But you did know," I interrupted. "Not all of it, maybe. But enough." His eyes filled with tears. But I didn't offer comfort. "Not this time. I wanted to believe we were a family," he said. So did I. When he left, he took the folder with him. A week later, I was served court papers. Vanessa was contesting the eviction. Daniel had joined the suit. Together, they were claiming I was mentally unfit and had revoked the estate under manipulation or confusion. I stood before the judge wearing my navy dress, my wedding ring, and a thin gold chain around my neck. Not my mother's emerald, but something simpler. A quiet reminder of who I used to be. Who I still was. Their lawyer painted a picture of an old woman unraveling, emotionally volatile, forgetful, possibly dangerous to herself. Then my lawyer stood and played the footage. Vanessa opening my mail. Vanessa laughing about the stolen necklace. Vanessa telling Daniel to just keep nodding when she forgets. It was all there. My voice never raised. My hands always still. Just truth frame by frame. The courtroom shifted. I saw eyes widen. A few mouths slightly open. Vanessa sat stiff, lips pressed together. Daniel, pale, shaking, could not look at me. By the third day, the judge called both legal teams into chambers. When they returned, the decision was clear. The life estate was nullified. Ownership returned fully to me. And the claim of mental instability? Dismissed. Completely. Outside the courthouse, Daniel tried to speak to me. I held up a hand. "I gave you everything," I said. "And you chose silence." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry, Mom." "I know." He stepped back. Not toward Vanessa, not toward me. Just away. I walked to my car alone. But the air felt cleaner than it had in months. I turned the key in the ignition. And drove home. Not to a war zone. Not to a house full of strangers. But home. The house was silent again. Not the kind of silence that comes from loneliness, but the kind born from peace. From closure. From the sound of air flowing freely through a space no longer poisoned by whispers. It took weeks for everything to feel normal again, if you could even call it that. Vanessa and Daniel were gone. No lawsuit. No second chances. They left behind a few boxes, a pale stain where their modern couch used to sit, and the lingering memory of everything they tried to take. I walked from room to room in the early mornings, barefoot on hardwood. The light poured in through the windows the way it used to. Unfiltered. Soft. Honest. In the sewing room, I returned my mother's chair. In the hallway, I rehung the family photos. Not in perfect lines, but in the pattern they always were. Slightly tilted. Full of character. Downstairs, I opened the attic. The ornaments were still there. And so was the rug from Charleston. I unrolled it in the foyer, smoothed it with both hands, and stood in the center, eyes closed, remembering the way it used to smell after rain. And then something unexpected happened. Marjorie came by with a friend, a quiet woman named Carla. She was older than me, wore long sleeves in summer, and barely spoke above a whisper. She was staying in a shelter nearby after being driven from her own home by a daughter-in-law not unlike Vanessa. "She doesn't need a handout," Marjorie said softly. Just a safe place. For a while. I looked at Carla. Then I looked at the guest room. Felt like an answer. A purpose. Within days, Carla moved in. We ate dinner in silence at first, but eventually she opened up. Her story, though different in detail, echoed mine. And I realized how many women must be out there, erased, dismissed, trapped behind smiles and locked doors. So I opened the house. Slowly. Carefully. Word spread among Marjorie's friends and then among their friends too. Women came and went. Some stayed a few days. Others a few weeks. One painted in the mornings. One kept a journal beside her tea. One never spoke but always left the windows cracked open to let the wind sing. They called it the Whitmore house. I never planned to name it. But the name stuck. We planted herbs in the backyard. Repaired the old swing. Hung fairy lights on the porch. Not to impress. Not to decorate. But to reclaim joy, piece by piece. There were no rules here. Only this. You do not have to prove your pain. You are believed the moment you walk in. One evening I sat on the porch alone, a blanket across my lap, listening to Carla and two other women laughing in the kitchen. For the first time in years I smiled without needing to force it. The wind was gentle that night. The house breathed easy. And so did I.